The man we are going to talk about is not just a criminal, but he is a real legend even among other famous serial killers, not only because of the number, but because of the incredible brutality of the crimes. It's not surprising, except that this maniac from the American town of Milwaukee tortured and killed people. After death, he also raped them, and after all that, he also could eat human flesh. The future serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was born in 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA. Parents were Professor Lionel Dahmer and housewife Josie Dahmer. While his father made efforts to care for him and provide a good education, his mother was known to be very unstable and occasionally sought treatment at psychiatric clinics. Eventually, the couple divorced, and Jeffrey and his brother remained with their father, who later remarried. In school, the boy studied excellently and had creative interests. He played in the school orchestra, participated in tennis, and contributed to the school newspaper. After graduating from high school, Jeffrey Dahmer attended university but was expelled shortly after due to alcoholic addiction. In 1979, he decided to pursue a career as a military contractor and served as a corpsman at a military base in Germany. However, he was discharged in 1981 for the same reason: his struggles with alcoholism. Dahmer returned to the United States after spending some time in Ohio and Miami. He eventually settled at his grandmother's house and began working at a local confectionery factory in 1985. 2 years later, he moved out of his grandmother's house in Milwaukee. While his particular behavior may have been noticed by his parents, they seemingly did not give it much consideration. Although his reserved nature wasn't particularly alarming, his hobby of dissecting and preserving animal corpses was clearly unusual for a teenager. Jeffrey Dahmer also had early homosexual tendencies, but the problem was not that the guy preferred partners of his own sex, but that he wanted to abuse, hurt, and perform other strange acts on them. That's why all the people killed were males between the age of 14 and 30. In 1988, he was brought in for acts of a sexual nature over a 13-year-old boy, but during interviews with the police he demonstrated such adequacy that he wasn't even given a term, although at this time on the account of Dahmer was already 4 victims. Jeffrey Dahmer committed his first murder when he was 18 years old, bringing a 17-year-old boy to his parents' home. He induced him to engage in homosexual intercourse and drug use, then killed him, and managed to dismember the body and bury it in the neighborhood. The second murder he committed almost 10 years later, and the victim was also a man who was Dahmer's lover. This time, the murder took place in a hotel, but all subsequent cases took place at Dahmer's house and followed a similar pattern: meeting in a bar, proposing a visit, same-sex relations, drugs, drinking, and then murder, more often by strangulation. But it was the end of his career. Let's just say it wasn't enough for Dahmer to kill unconscious victims. He tortured them by drilling a hole in the skulls of still living people and pouring acid into it. Such deaths were not quick and were undoubtedly extremely painful. The maniac also treated the corpses with great imagination. He cut some parts of their torso and stored them in the refrigerator, painting the skulls as souvenirs, dissolved separate pieces of the body in barrels of acid, fried, and ate human meat. The maniac was apprehended only thanks to a man who escaped. In June 1991, his victim Tracy escaped from Dahmer's house in handcuffs. The victim approached the police and they were horrified when they entered the flat and saw the dismembered bodies stored there. Surprisingly, the red-handed arrest could have happened earlier. There was another person in strange circumstances, the brother of a once raped teenager who blotted himself out of Dahmer's house and rushed to the police for help. But then, the maniac managed to convince the police patrol that he had just had a fight with his lover, and the police went away, leaving the victim alone with the killer. And the almost saved Connor, that was the name of the boy, met the same fate as the other murdered, It was at the end of May 1991. The investigation against Jeffrey Dahmer began in July 1991 after he was arrested in a house with obvious evidence of the crimes. The killer had 17 victims in all, not counting the survivor Edwards and the boy he raped. His name was Anakin. At the same time, Dahmer confessed to all these crimes, describing even the gory details of his actions. However, already during the trial, Jeffrey began to claim that committed these terrible acts in an adequate state, but now realized his guilt, agrees that he should be punished, and very sympathetic to the parents of his victims. Furthermore, the maniac unexpectedly embraced religion, undergoing baptism as a Christian and claiming that his Christian faith was responsible for his monstrous actions. Attorneys hired by Jeffrey's parents advocated for a plea of insanity, arguing that he wasn't aware of his actions. However, the court and mental health experts who assessed Jeffrey's psyche deemed him to be mentally sound, albeit with significant mental issues, including necrophilia. Considering the severity and quantity of his crimes, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment. Jeffrey Dahmer did not contest the sentence, but requested that it be changed to the death penalty, although it wasn't an option under Wisconsin law where he was tried. Initially, right after the trial, he was placed in solitary confinement in a high-security prison due to his extreme danger and possible mental instability. In this setting, he had no contact with other inmates. However, later on, he was moved out of solitary confinement to other areas of the prison, which proved to be a fatal decision. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer and two other inmates, Christopher Scarver and Jess Anderson, were doing cleaning work in the shower room and were not observed by the wardens, when suddenly Scarver, who was in prison for murder, using a mop given to him for cleaning, struck two other inmates hard in the head. They didn't even have time to resist. Jeffrey Dahmer died immediately due to a skull injury, and Anderson was taken to hospital, but doctors were unable to save his life. After his death, the body of Jeffrey Dahmer, a sophisticated maniac, attracted the interest of scientists who wanted to study the brain of a man with such rare mental troubles. But the parents of the deceased did not agree to this, and as a result, the body was kept in the morgue for 6 months while the legal battle was going on. The court ruled in favor of the parents' rights to the body, and cremation took place, and the ashes were divided into 2 urns and given to the mother and father. In 1996, some people decided to auction some of the famous killer's belongings, including murder weapons, torture instruments, and a refrigerator for the body, but this caused public outrage, and the items were bought out and burnt. 2 books and 3 biographical films were created based on Jeffrey Dahmer's life. Some argue that this story indirectly influenced numerous thriller writers. People often attribute a sense of uniqueness and originality, albeit horrifying, to the actions of a homicidal maniac. However, in reality, society's indifference towards punishment for criminals may contribute to the emergence of antisocial psychopaths. If law enforcement agencies had dealt with Dahmer properly when he was first arrested, perhaps there wouldn't have been 17 victims of the Milwaukee cannibal. Here is such a creepy biography of Jeffrey Dahmer. All these facts lead to horror. Even the most indifferent person just in the head doesn't fit how such a person can do, and whether he is such, no, it's more like the devil in the flesh, designed to sow horror and fear among people, and none of the mere mortals cannot foresee it. Thank you for watching. I recommend you to watch other interesting and no less shocking stories. Click right now, subscribe to the channel, put likes and leave your comments.